Hey guys, Nate here. I decided to do this assignment as a recording rather than writing it out because I usually, as part of writing stuff, talk to myself out loud to get my thoughts out. And I figured as long as I'm doing that, might as well just record that and skip the step of writing altogether. So the two quests that I did were the weekly planner, as you can see here, and the passion project, which I'll get to in a little bit. So the weekly planner, what really helped me here was setting up an actual workout routine where I'm like deciding I'm going to spend my time on this day doing this, because one of the problems that I have is actually getting myself out and doing that. But if I have a schedule set up for it, then it's not really a choice. It's just sort of, well, this is what I'm doing today, so I'm going to go do that today. Another thing that it really helped me with was figuring out a good schedule for cleaning up my apartment, because I tend to let it get a bit messy a lot of the time, and tackling like one or two things every day instead of having it all just build up and then I never get started on it because it's such an overwhelming task. It really helps. So that's my third priority in here. I have a shelf from IKEA that's been sitting on my living room floor for like a week and a half, and I still need to put that together. Um, but that's the plan for Monday. As for play, I started playing Minecraft again recently, so that's fun. And I've also got a Pathfinder game every Tuesday, and I enjoy working on new characters when I can for that. Obviously, the first and second priorities every day are my classes, the creative presentation, and psychology of play. For pushing myself, it's a little hard. I don't have a lot to do in that regard, but I do have my passion project itself, um, which, as I've written here, make a new spell. That'll make sense in a bit. Um, yeah. So the thing, this planner itself obviously doesn't let you schedule things out on an hour by hour basis, which I think is good for what it's for. But it did actually get me thinking about not scheduling stuff out in that way, but I think it was called BRAC. Let me. I'm gonna find the. I did, yeah, understanding and maximizing your BRAC, the body's natural mechanism for rest. This was a thing from the 1.2 reading. By the way, Teach, in case you hadn't noticed, this is the part where I link back to the reading, which you said to underline, so I'm vocalizing the underlining. That was words. Anyway, um, reading this really did help me figure out why sometimes I just feel like passing out instead of working, and other times that seemed random. Um, I'd be like super energized, like, yeah, let's do this, let's go. Um, but since I was working with the schedule anyway, it got me thinking about trying to schedule around that cycle in a way that would actually let me be efficient in work, which honestly I really hadn't thought about. Like, even when I was doing the reading, I sort of glossed over it a little bit, but it really got me thinking about that more, and I think that's going to be really helpful for me moving forward. Um, so, in terms of sparking creativity, obviously the weekly planner isn't the best thing to do that. But again, going back to that schedule around the BRAC cycle, I think that would count as sparking creativity, because I'm trying to figure out a creative way to get myself motivated, keep myself motivated and energized, and figure out the best time to actually do my work when needed. Um, so I think that that's that one. Now, on to the fun part. That would be this here. Yes. So, this is a site called Roll20.net. which is where I play my Pathfinder game. And for those of you who don't know, which I assume would probably be most of you, Pathfinder is similar to Dungeons and Dragons, like with the rolling of dice and general nerdiness that comes along with it, but it's a lot more complicated than that. So this is a game that I'm in currently. It's called Steps Towards Elysium, um, and I just wanted to bring this up as like an example of the map that we have. So each of these here, these are characters. They're what's called a non-player character. So there's something controlled by the game master, who's basically God of the world. They make the plans, they decide what's going to happen. And then we've got our players. This is my character over here, who's currently in a coma, which is why he's in this tent. And we've got Bren, and there's Gravy Boots over here with his friend Isabel. One of our party members is missing. He's been kidnapped by a dragon, and his hand has been cut off, so we need to go rescue him. But that's an issue for another day. That's not at all related to this. And we all have our character sheets. So this is the sheet for my character named Argyle Darren, right? So this looks very complicated and overwhelming at first, I know, but there is a good explanation for it, and I'm going to go into that in a second. So this over here is my own game that I've set up as a sort of testing zone where I can make my own characters. Like I have a copy of Argyle's sheet in here. So all of this is a way to simulate reality in a way. So like, for example, all of these skills here, each of them is related to an in-game activity. So let's say you wanted to try and convince a salesman to sell you something at a better price. Well, you would have to role play that out and say what your character says and act in character. But as for mechanics and figuring out whether you succeed, you would do something called a diplomacy check. So my character is pretty good at that. And yeah, so 28. So that would generally be enough to get me a better price. Now, I know that all these numbers are completely abstract because you don't have anything to reference them to, but everything is rolled on, all of these checks are rolled on a digital 20-sided die. So you can get a result between 1 and 20 with a 5% chance for each. So let's say you needed to roll a 13 or above, right? So you could roll a 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, or 20. So that is 8 different numbers. I'm bad at math. So that means you would have a 40% chance of success because 8 out of 20. So every point of bonus is an extra 5% chance of success. So because I have a +9 bonus on diplomacy rolls, that means that I am 45% more likely to succeed at something, which is pretty nice. At the same time, you're rolling it against something called a difficulty class, which is usually 10 plus something. So that would make it less likely to succeed. So there's no real way to get 100% chance of success. Well, there is, but if the game is balanced. I just realized that I've been rambling about this, and none of it matters. I'm going to move on now. So, point is, I very much enjoy playing this game, but there are some problems with it. But instead of just complaining about them, I decided that it would be fun to make my own version. And here we come to my passion project. So that's not what I wanted to do. Let's go this way. So I have this folder of all of the different ideas that I've come up with. So I've got a couple of things that don't really have much on them, like this character creation guide. You may notice it's pretty much completely blank, but this is a file that I would fill out with instructions on how you would create a character for the game. And I've got like a couple of spitballing documents where I just did speech to text on here. I haven't really made this into anything intelligible yet, but I'm working on that. And then I've got folders for like bestiaries, for monsters, different classes in the game, how combat works, different items, spells, and just general lore about the world. Now, spells, this is my favorite one because I've been working on actually making new spells. So, like for example, there's one here, agility. So this would be a relatively high level spell, level 3 or 4, which again I know is an abstract number, but it's something you would get as. Actually, there's no real good way to explain that, but it's a relatively high power level spell. So there are many different aspects to it, like arcane, divine, and nature casters would have access to it and what level they get access to it at. There's the arcane school, which is transmutation for this one. There's domains, which I haven't really worked on for this spell yet. And then there's the casting details, which is casting time, casting components, saving throws, all of that. I'll explain in a second. And then this spell is all about making your character fast. So you get +4 dexterity, which is a measure of your agility, well, hence the name of the spell, your general speed, your ability to do things with incredible precision. You get a +2 dodge bonus to your armor class, which is how hard it is to hit you. So obviously you're faster, so you move out of the way easier. You get a +10 movement speed bonus on all your speed types, which is, well, you're fast now. You get a +2 bonus on melee attack rolls because if you're moving faster than your opponent, it's harder for them to get out of the way. And then there's something called heightening, which isn't important, but it's a mechanic that I've been sort of tinkering with. So I figured a good way to actually go through and like explain how this works is to go through the process of creating a brand new spell. And I happen to have an idea that's been sort of bouncing around in my head that I've been working on for a while. So this spell will be called Lightning Lasso. So this would be a 3rd level spell. Evocation. So the different schools of magic are all centralized around a certain idea. So evocation is the elements like earth, air, fire, and ice, and also sound and force and some other stuff that doesn't really matter all that much. But this is all about control. Like imagine stuff from Avatar: The Last Airbender, controlling the elements. That's evocation. So because this is a lightning lasso, you're controlling lightning and bending it to your will, obviously it would be an evocation spell. There are a bunch of other different schools of magic, like enchantment, which is sort of mind control, like messing with the mind, messing with perception. There's illusion, which is, well, creating stuff that looks like it's there but isn't. There's abjuration, which is defensive magic. There's transmutation, which is changing stuff into other stuff. There's conjuration, which is teleportation and making things out of not things, just making stuff for free, basically. All of this is just a way to make the game a little easier to understand, even though a lot of this information would be overwhelming to someone who's not as invested in it as I am. So as for domains, this relates to like some characters gain magical capability through study or innate magical talent. Others gain it through worshiping a god, and gods have different domains. Like for example, you might have let's say Thor, right? Let's say you worship Thor. Well, he's the god of thunder and of probably combat. So the domains that he would have would be, well, storm and battle, probably. That's stuff that I haven't really hashed out the details of yet, but basically you worship a god, you get powers related to them. So this might be a spell that someone who worships Thor would have access to. So, casting time. Here's something interesting. There are different types of actions in this game. So, combat is split up into rounds. Each round, everybody gets to take their turn, which would involve a standard action, which is most things like swinging a blade or casting a spell, a move action, which is moving around or drawing a weapon, something that's less strenuous than a standard action. And then there's a variety of other actions they can take, like immediate actions, free actions, swift actions, but all of that is, again, something that's a little more complicated than I think I have time to explain. The basic idea, though, is that each round is 6 seconds. So everybody's doing all of their stuff in 6 seconds. So a standard action is the approximation of about 3.5 seconds, I'd say. So most spells have a casting time of 1 standard action. So this is not going to be something that's ridiculously powerful. So I think that's a fair casting time for it. Casting components. So this is something that's interesting. There are 3 types of components for spells. Verbal, which involves like saying words, like speaking an incantation. Somatic, which is hand gestures. So if you've seen, for example, Doctor Strange, all of the spells that he casts require him to make a specific motion with his hands. That is an example of a somatic component. If you mess that up, you don't get the spell right. Although, now that I think about it, none of his spells have verbal components. That's kind of really overpowered in this game. Anyway, that's aside from the point. So we're going to give this spell a verbal component and a somatic component. An idea that I've been toying with is giving each spell an actual incantation. So if the player decides that they want to roleplay as their character actually casting the spell, they can. I'm not really sure if that's a good idea or not. Might be good as an option, but that's something I'll think about later. So, saving throw. This is something we'll get into a bit later, and spell resistance also later. So, all of this is stuff that we can work out a bit, well, later. So now I realize that I haven't actually explained what Lightning Lasso does. And this is one of the big things with creating a new spell. You want to figure out, well, what do I want this spell to do? And then you can figure out the actual details of it, like all the stuff that I just did, afterwards, once you've figured out the actual concept of the spell. So this spell, you would make sort of a rope made out of lightning, which you would use to hold an opponent in place. And since it's made of lightning, they would probably take damage from it. So as for the description, we would say something along the lines of, you throw a lasso constructed of lightning, or of pure electricity, make it sound a little more interesting, at a selected enemy. There we go. That's how you spell words. And now we get into the mechanics part of it. You make a ranged touch attack against the chosen foe. So, armor class was something I touched on a little bit earlier, but it's a definition of how difficult it is to hit you. There are several ways that you can add to your armor class. Having a high dexterity score means you're fast, you dodge out of the way of stuff easier. Having really heavy armor, like for example, if you were wearing full metal plate armor, obviously it's going to be hard to hit you because a lot of things will just bounce off your plate. And adding like a dodge bonus, again, making yourself faster. Or natural armor, if you have really tough scales, then you're going to be harder to hit. So because of that, there are 2 different types of attacks. There's a regular attack, which goes against your armor class as a total, and a touch attack, which would only require the person making the attack to come into contact with you. So if your main method of not getting hit by attacks is getting out of the way of attacks, like with high dodge AC, then obviously you're not getting hit by stuff by just not letting it touch you in the first place. But if your method is letting it hit you and just bounce off, you're not going to be very hard to hit with a touch attack because all of your armor all your armor class is just from armor, so someone can just poke you and then you've gotten hit by a spell. Most spells are touch attacks because spells are more limited. Like someone can swing a sword all day, but someone can't cast spells all day. So because they're more limited, that means that they have to be a little bit more powerful. So, you make a ranged touch attack against the chosen foe. Alright, great. So because this is magic, you don't really need to control the spell itself in order to get it to wrap around your target. So let's say we don't want to make this unfair. So let's give the target a chance to get out of the way. Let's say they can make a reflex saving throw, so try to dodge out of the way, right? So your target must succeed at a reflex saving throw or be entangled. So entangled would be a status condition which would let's say they get held in place, right? They can't move around anymore. And because they can't move, well, they'd probably take a penalty to their dexterity and also probably a penalty to their attack rolls in melee because it's difficult to swing around if you're being held down by something, right? And you can't get out of the way of stuff easily or move quickly if you can't move at all. So, yeah, that seems fair. Your targets must succeed at a reflex saving throw or be entangled. So now there are two aspects of this. Because entangled is such a powerful effect, there are two ways that your opponent can avoid this, either by not getting hit by the lasso at all or making a reflex saving throw. Although both of those things are now based on dexterity. So this is where the design aspect comes in of, well, you're making it very easy to target one particular type of character and very difficult to target another type of character. So one type of character that's easy to hit with this is the slow, hulking, tanky guy, because it's very easy to hit their touch AC, but it's also pretty. Their reflex saves are usually not very good because they're not very fast. But the type of character that has a high touch AC usually also has a high reflex bonus. So maybe we should make this a different type of saving throw. Actually, perhaps we should make this a will saving throw. If your target is capable of resisting the magic enough, then they can get out of it. But this is something where you just have to figure out how balanced it is, how useful it is in different situations. The only way you can really figure that out is by playing with it. So, target must succeed at a reflex saving throw or be entangled. Now, we get into the damage part. Whether the target makes their throw or not, they take 1d8. So that would be rolling a digital 8-sided die. So it'd be a result anywhere between 1 and 8. Electricity damage. So regardless of whether you entangle them or not, you still manage to do a little bit of damage, which is fine. Now, should we give the target a third chance? You know what? Yeah, I think we should. On the target's turn, they may spend, there we go, a standard action to attempt, what should we make this? It would be, there's another aspect of the game called combat maneuvers, where you try to trip or grapple or disarm or push someone. So considering entangled is very similar to being grappled, let's say they can attempt to break out by making a combat maneuver check. So that would be determined by something called the combat maneuver bonus, which gets shortened to CMB. A CMB check to escape the bonds with a difficulty class equal to the spell's DC. They may spend a full round. So if they wanted to do nothing else and just try to escape, I'd say give them a bonus. So they may spend a full round action to gain a +2 bonus on this check. And actually, there's another thing called Escape Artist that works with this as well. So may attempt a CMB or Escape Artist check. So Escape Artist is a skill check which you can use to get out of bonds, so that makes sense that it would be used. If they succeed, the spell immediately ends on that target. And here's where it gets interesting. I'll get to that in a second. If they fail, they are entangled for the remainder of the spell's duration and take 1d8 that's not how you spell that, electricity damage at the beginning of your turn. So if somebody messes it up, then they're held in place and they take more damage because they're being held by a rope made out of electricity. So now we get into some more interesting stuff. So we've figured out the saving throws. There's reflex partial because it doesn't allow them to avoid the whole effects, and C-text because there's more to it. Spell resistance. Spell resistance is something where a creature may be innately resistant to magic. So we'll say, since this is a powerful spell, yes. Now, range. I think you'd have to be relatively close to your target for this. So we'll say close, which is a range of 25 feet plus 5 feet per 2 levels. Duration. Now, this is interesting because, again, 1 round is 6 seconds. So holding someone in place for an extended period of time is extremely powerful. So we wouldn't want to make, normally spells like this might have a duration of 1 round per level, but I think we should make it 1 round per 2 levels to keep it a little bit more balanced. There we go. That's the things. Now, effects, this would be 1 or more lassos. Or electric lassos. And here comes the interesting bit. Something that I'd like for this spell is so that you'd be able to throw out more than 1 lasso, so you can chain more than 1 enemy. So let's change this to at the selected enemies. Why is this the way that it is? There we go. So now I have to figure out how many lassos. So let's say 1 electric, that's not how you spell that, 1 electric lasso plus 1 per, let's say 3 levels. I want that. 1 per 3 levels. There we go. That's for the sake of consistency. Let's space this out a little bit. So now we need to add a notes section to this. Notes. What is this? 11 and not bolded. So let's change this to 11 and not bolded. You may choose to target 1 creature with multiple lassos. Because if you have like fewer targets than the number of lassos you can make, you don't want them to go to waste. So if you do so, you gain a +2 bonus on your attack roll, and the DC of the spell increases by 2. But let's say you get that per lasso, if you really, really want somebody to be stuck. Each additional lasso grants you a +2 bonus on your attack roll, and increases this. Oops. And increases the spell DC by 2. There. So now we have a pretty interesting spell. This adds several combat options. It's fun. It's useful. It's something that could very well turn the tide of battle, but it could also end up not doing anything. So this is the type of stuff that I'd be doing with my passion project. Like I go in and I design this type of stuff, and I design encounters and monsters and creatures and characters and weapons and spells, and all of this stuff all comes together. At least that's my hope. I really hope that I can end up making this useful and interesting. So I think, in terms of pulling this back to the reading, like refocusing for a second, I guess the best thing I can connect this to was the play personalities, because I'd say I'm a storyteller when actually playing the game and a director when making stuff for the game. And it's a really interesting combination to work with because I'm both a player and a creator. It gives me perspective on what will or will not be fun. And I think that's really valuable for me. Anyway, I've just realized that I've been talking for like half an hour. So I should probably cut this here and upload it. But I hope you guys enjoyed my explanation, if you managed to sit through it all without wanting to blow your brains out. And I guess I'll talk to you all later. Bye.